I hope you're ready for some crazy house. This is from the second round of the World Championship qualifier. Mindhunter0101 is facing okei. And we are watching this from the view of okei, who's playing white in the first game. Let's just catch up with the first few moves. okei is playing d4, quick development. Also playing some provocative moves on the king's side, foreshadowing his light squared bishop. And we are live. So okei blitzed out those first few moves. Notice that d6 is a bit weak. The knight could easily attack the pawn from b5. So what is white supposed to do here? He goes for the d6 pawn, and even if it costs him a piece, he could take on d6 and then fork on e5. So black moves out of the fork. Also threatening the bishop here on g3, and allowing black to take on g3 would cripple the white pawn formation on the king's side. So that is probably not to be recommended. Notice also that black has not castled yet, so the h pawn could be coming up the board pretty soon. White decides to sacrifice his piece anyway, rather than going on the defensive with bishop h2 when I think h5 looks just fine. So can he do something with his initiative here? It doesn't quite have the momentum here going. Black looks solid, and black has a couple of light pieces in hand waiting to be placed. So knight h5 is interesting. Actually, it blocks the h5 idea by black here. But as you can see, the king's side here is a bit weak, and especially the h5 pawn. White giving up more material here. Black could take on d6 twice. And frankly, I don't see why he shouldn't. Trading first in g2. But then he didn't get the chance to win material on d6. So this move swings the knight over to the king's side, where all the action will be, probably. There's a knight fork on f4. You could pick up the h5 pawn. But watch out for a knight fork here. Even though letting go of the b7 pawn won't keep black sleepless at night, because the b7 pawn is pretty much unimportant. So what do you do here? Well, the castling here certainly takes care of the knight at d6 problems. Yeah, I would also push the h pawn, even though if it's not necessarily theoretically the best move, you need to create some confusion here on the king's side. And this weakens f6 somewhat. You do have an open g file here to toy with. And do we have any viewers? Yay, 2 viewers! Welcome. Welcome to the Crazy House World Championship. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. They are playing with increments, so 37 seconds is quite a lot of time, actually. And taking on h6 was probably the wise decision. Why not just take a pawn, smile, be happy, and hopefully mend the position with pawn at g7 at some point. But now he has to endure some semi-attack here by white. But not so sure what he's threatening at the moment. Putting the pawn on g7 though, it gave white quite a natural plan. So maybe take e7, play knight g4, I'm not sure. You would like to have some diags in hand here. But why not just move the king and try to claim the g file? Actually, that bishop on f4 might come in handy for white here. Let's say you play knight at h5 and you try to force him to trade it. Knight at h5, bishop takes, pawn takes, then you have a lot of pressure here on the dark squares. I would have gone for the bishop here on f4 for sure. Well, now Mindhunter is a bit low on time, actually. Just playing on increment now. And the question is, does he have a mating attack? I think white needs to take the rook and just hope for the best. Because now he's getting mated in too. Let's see. How was the position? Somewhere around here. This is bad, yeah, bad for white. But knight at h5, as I said, going for the bishop seems better than what was played in the game. Now the question is, how bad is king takes f g3? Is probably a forced mate, but oh well, it's lost anyway. So let's take a look at the second game. Just a quick recap. Pawn at b5 is rather unusual. A quite committal move. And black sacrifices a pawn just to get some sort of initiative. Both players have played pretty fast here, so I guess it's preparation, at least from Mindhunter. What else is there to do here? I suppose you could just move the knight. Could go to b4 maybe. Well, we can find out afterwards. Putting the queen on e4 maybe is the best option, preventing e5, but it will get chased then. This is a very aggressive option, and black just takes everything here. Keeping the material. I suppose you should take the bishop, even though black can play queen e4 and pick it up. There's another fork here on d4, and with the king on e6, white has a long-lasting compensation for whatever material he sacrificed at the moment. And it's just a piece and a pawn for a queen. which should make it quite adequate. But what's up with the long think here? Taking on c6 just seems so natural. Okay, he tries to win the bishop instead. And if king takes here, you have a knight fork on c6, but the king is heading back, and when you take here, the rook takes. Yeah, should be good for white. And meanwhile, the white king is absolutely safe. Perhaps it's better to try to hide over here. I'm not sure if it matters at all, though. But notice that white doesn't have any knights, at least. Which makes it a bit more difficult to get to the black king. So okei runs to the king's side. And he is in a lot of danger here for quite a while. Just try to hide, tuck the king away, king f7. I don't see how the other options could be any better. Now the king will end up deep into enemy territory. Just pick up the queen on d8 and it's all over. So now if king g6 you have bishop h5, and now you have maybe pawn to d4, but after g5 there is an escape route. So is this something? Pawn at e2. There is some sort of attack here going on, actually. a knight at f4. What's happening here? Oh, he could have placed pawn on b2 also. But is this, was that mate? Or am I blind? I didn't quite understand the ending there. Let's see what happened. White is a lot better here. But why take on d3? Okay, so the idea is pawn at d2 here, but I would have tried placing a pawn here. See what white plays, what black plays here. It's not so easy to find the mate. Okay, that was strange. Instead of sacrificing here, I would strongly advise white players to just take on d8. Why not? Because then the queen can cut off the black king. Maybe queen at f5. You don't have to think a whole lot here. Although the computer does recommend bishop takes g4. Okay, let's see. The next game is already on its way, and I think they repeated the opening from the last game. And this time, white sacrifices on f7. It's maybe not a sacrifice, a pseudo-sacrifice, because it gets the piece back. But I'm a little bit worried about the open, semi-open f-file here. Because black could at some point maybe take on g4. And yes, he does take on g4. And I think this position has a lot of potential for black here. Maybe take g4. Yeah, he took on g4 and we're back live. And I think simply taking on g2 is a threat here. Ripping the king side open. And if you don't find anything better, you could always take on g3 and then perhaps bishop e3. I don't like the look of white's position here at all. It's safe to take on d5, just put a blocker on f7. Maybe the queen can come to h4. Threaten to take twice on g3. Plenty of nasty moves to choose from for black. Maybe pawn e3. You could consider knight h3 also. So maybe this is where you take on g3, take on e6, and then bishop takes, you put pawn on f7. And you gain the initiative. Quite an audience now. Welcome everybody. Because I suppose you don't want to get forked here. If you take, the bishop takes, the rook is hanging. So that's why I suggested taking on g3 first. F takes. Okay, but maybe he's considering sacrificing on f7. Although black has e5 and g5 under control. Hi there, Zarza. And everybody else. Mr. Sabon. Hi there. I'm not sure why Mindhunter is thinking so much, because he has an excellent position. Is he going to hide in the corner maybe with the king? Take on f7, king h8. Yep. Just trying to build some pressure here. But maybe it's not the best kind of pressure, because now if white gets a heavy piece, maybe pawn h3, threaten to take the rook might land on g8. So the knight f5 idea looked a bit like panic to me. Oh, e4 looks very aggressive. White wants to take the rook. Notice though that the bishop is covering f7, so no smothered mate on f7 after trades on g8. So I'm not sure what's going on here. What's the plan here for white? Hi there, Kyle. Both players having some time trouble. And now there's a huge threat, taking on g8 with a smothered mate on f7. And black just didn't see it. Okay, interesting. But I think black was doing just fine there. Good question, Mr. Sabon. I'm not sure how good Nils was at Crazy House. He was obviously a terrific Bughouse player, but I'm not sure how much Crazy House he has played. Yeah, black is a lot better here. Knight f5, not the best move. Yeah, simply taking g3 looks just fine. And I wonder where the game finally turned. This is super good for black still. But now there's a threat of queen takes g8. So apparently there's a mate, a forced mate that starts with bishop h2, building a base there on h2. And then you can maybe put a rook on g3 if the king advances. But that was a huge blunder. Instead of mating e7, he got himself mated in 2. So let's look at the new game. What was the opening here? The same as before with the early pawn b5. And this time, okey switches to bishop g4, sacrificing an entire piece. And I think this looks very dubious for black. He has so many weaknesses on the light squares. To start with, g4 is hanging, c6 is hanging, and d7 is weak, and also the knight f7 tricks. So I think you can just pick up c6 and maybe run back to e5. Also, if you pick up the pawn, you have interesting possibilities here with pawn at b7. I'd say it's just lost after knight takes c6. Lost for black, that is. So you could put the knight on e5 or d4. Sensible alternatives, and b7 is very aggressive. Maybe bishop b5 here, because if the queen takes, you can take on a8. Maybe bishop b5 was better. Now there are ideas like knight a6, threatening c7 and also threatening rook at b8. If white had had a pawn in hand, he could have played knight e5, giving up the queen because he has pawn d7 and rook e8. But where do you get the pawn? Maybe it's knight a6. Knight a6, is that a move? Let's have a look at this position again. What do you say? Is bishop b5 better, maybe? I was thinking another interesting possibility here is actually rook b8, queen takes b8, and then take here and take on d7 if he blocks. But maybe that's just too fancy. Okay, so now he has the pawn in hand, and black doesn't have the time to take on f3 because of pawn d7, rook e8. The queen is hanging. f7 is hanging. The back rank is weak. So there's a forced mate here, starting with queen takes f7. Queen takes pawn d7, rook c8, for instance. And Mindhunter sees it. A nice finish to that game. And I think okei needs to find some other opening. What does the computer recommend? Yeah, knight b4 seems sensible. And this was just super bad. What about the bishop b5 idea? It's about the same. Okay, back in the game, and they are dueling in this variation. Maybe knight b7 followed by knight b7 followed by knight takes d6 is an idea here. This is too slow, I think. Black can simply castle. Give up a pawn. You have plenty of compensation. Just rook c8. You can take on c3 at leisure. But knight b7 and take on d6 with a fork here on e5, I think you have an ongoing attack then. That might be the idea that okei is looking for in the opening. So I think black misplayed this, because now white has bishop, queen to b7 and take the rook. There's no way to save it. But in this position, why not just castle? Isn't that better? But then there's knight e7, so I'm not sure. What is this? I'm not sure why white gave up those two light squared pieces when there was a safe rook to pick up. Okay, let's just take the rook, because then you have a nasty threat on g8. Or is there something forced down here? Knight g2, you can play king f1, and if you place another knight on e3, you can escape to g1. And I think this will backfire, because there is a forced mate. If you take the queen here, you have knight g8 followed by rook e7. That's mate. And as black, you need to play something like, I don't know, rook e8. Protect the back rank. The books behind me, I'd say the top 3 shelves are chess books, and the bottom 3 are mathematics books. Yeah, something like that. Quite impressive. What's not so impressive is that I haven't read them all. I should, I suppose. So Mindhunter looking for a way forward here. Okay, rook c8. I don't have a feel, really. I'm a high school teacher in mathematics. I'm pretty sure that there is someone in the world who has read, well, most of the books I have behind me. And okei is putting some pressure here, serious pressure on. And remember, there's a knight check here whenever you like. So maybe not check on g8 now. Maybe just pick up the knight on d1. Maybe it was too soon to check here on g8. I would have loved the possibility with 2 knights in hand when I started placing the checks. You probably need to take on d1. I don't see anything forced for black. And I'm wondering if this is good. Is this really a forced mate? Is it? Yeah, rook g5. It's forced mate. Very nice. He found it. But did black really need to play it like this? First of all, let's check this briefly. My initial idea here was knight b7. And it's the first choice for the engine, but he still doesn't like the white position. After this, yeah, simply castle short, much better. And here, this is good for black actually. But you shouldn't take on a8. Instead put a piece on h4. And here, why didn't white play queen b7? I don't understand. But pretty soon he was back on track. This is dangerous for black. And I can see that black had problems finding a good move here. Pawn b7, very strong. Under promoting. Rook at f3 is apparently the best move. Makes very much sense. Strong in defense and offense. And here, yeah, black is actually winning here. Look at the king h4 possibility here. Yeah, I had a feeling f4 was not the correct move in the position. King h4, and actually black wins. Let's go back to the match where okei is in the lead, 3-2. And apparently they have switched openings here. He played an earlier d5 and an early trade on c3. Notice that he traded on c3 when white cannot take with his d pawn because of the queen trade. So this looks a bit passive for black, but yeah, bishop d7. One idea with bishop d7 is that if white plays knight e5, you can take on e5, and the bishop on b5 is hanging. You can do a knight takes e5 and take back on d7 with a knight. So this is aggressive. I'm fairly sure you should take with a pawn. That has to be the idea. Get some control here in the center. This looks too passive, I'd say. Although c3 is hanging, but no worries are there. Why not knight at e5, and if the queen takes here, bishop d2, and black is so far behind in development. I'd say the white initiative is just crushing here. Yeah. It's hard even to find a decent spot for the queen. And white can handle this positionally if he likes to, just castle and enjoy the initiative. Or he could get aggressive and take on f7 maybe. Golden rules. I suppose there are golden rules. First of all, the initiative in Crazy House is much more important than in chess. Yeah, don't lose is a very good. Play better than your opponent. Play fast and safe. All those. But you need to realize that the material, the relative material values, they are different from chess. That takes a while to get used to. So this is actually a quite interesting position now. Okay, find an interesting idea with pawn drops on e2, and if the queen takes now, you have knight f4. The king seems fairly safe on d1. And if black takes here, white can take and take on a8. So I think this was the best decision for white. Okay, he's getting low on time now. And one problem is that you cannot play rook b6 and chase the queen away because the queen just takes, because there's a mate on d8. And I think black panicked a bit here. The rook is hanging anyway. Maybe there's a forced mate starting with queen takes d7 also. That looked very suspicious. So let's say rook takes, queen takes, rook d8. I think you can take with the queen on d8 and liver mate. And now you have knight c6 if you like. You can pick up the rook. White has everything here. So not a very interesting position. At any point here, white could just take on b8. And it's forced mate. Actually looking for the quickest mate here is a bit unpragmatic, I think. And what's this? What is happening here? Okay. And I mean, if it's white to move, does he even have a strong continuation? And I think white missed, black missed knight f4. Just take the queen. Take the queen. No, now there's mate on e7 or f6. Black was winning there, wasn't he? So this is just super duper winning, but h5, what a slip. Okay, and okay, found the best move here. And simply just take on c8, because white doesn't have a mate here. Take knight at f4, yeah, that was what I said. Knight at f4, big opportunity. Take a8. Instead, black blundered here. He thought he had a mate, but white can just give his queen. And now all of a sudden, with the knight in hand, he has a forced mate. Okay, 3-all. And they have repeated the same opening. And I can't say this has been a success. This is too slow, I'd say. Bishop b7. Not a big threat at all. Black could just ignore it, I think. Play whatever move he likes to. Knight h4. White will pick up a pawn, but then you can start chasing the bishop. The bishop here is quite offside. And white spending 2 moves to pick up the rook on a8 is not impressive. So this is another way to do it. Maybe it's even better. A c2 is hanging. And look at the c6. These guys, they're not well coordinated at all. You could just ignore the knight, I think. Maybe take on c2. So my instinct says you need to keep the attack going, knight d7, and pretend you have the initiative. And if black plays along and moves his pieces, you can start trading and perhaps get a real initiative. So this is a typical point where you, as black, don't bother about your bishop. It's lost anyway. And when you take, you have a good move. You can take back. So let's find something aggressive here. A knight at f4, maybe, or a knight at h4. Surely pawn d7 isn't the right move. And these bishops are protecting each other, so that was a waste of a good pawn, I think. Actually, the pawn on d7 was more than a waste. It's just worsened the black pawn formation, making d6 a bit weak. But why not just take g2, put another knight here, try to get the attack going, or rook b5. If the bishop takes here, maybe rook b5. And I should say that the first player to reach 5.5 or more wins and is through to the third round. So, do you take the h3 pawn or do you take d5? I'd say take the bishop. So maybe this is the game that decides the outcome of this match. Don't waste all your time now, okay? You need to move your bishop, I think. Why not to f3? Save some precious time on your clock. And I see a very clear idea here for white. Pawn g3, move the king, rook to h1, try to make use of the open h file. It's not so easy to block the h file actually for black. And this wasn't the best pre-move I have seen. Wow. A knight on f1 will finish this, unless there's some other mate. Yeah, if white takes here, you have queen f2 and a diag on g3. White is still alive here. White is still alive. Covering f1. But now it's forced. Oh, what a game. Wild, crazy game. At this point, let's see what the computer thinks about this position. Yeah, rook b8 looks sensible. Bishop e7 was way too passive. And here, yeah, knight at d7, as I mentioned. Try to deplete the black forces. And they are trading mistakes here. White is in the driver's seat here, but he blundered here. Just take on e4. And this is hopeless, but he continued here to fight back. Did he miss any more chances? No, this was just winning for black. Okay, what has okay played in this line this time? So apparently he caught Mindhunter off guard, because Mindhunter has spent a minute here. So I wonder if the idea is pawn d7, or this whole line looks very murky, I'd say. e5 is hanging, the rook is hanging, the bishop here is hanging. So what happens if black takes the rook? I'm not sure. The idea by this pseudo sacrifice is that the queen takes, knight f3, and you can take back on e5. And I guess you could just take on b7, b5, sorry. Take on b5, queen takes, pawn takes, bishop takes, bishop at c6. Looks fine for black, I'd say. There is the queen check on c8, but queen at d8 should take care of it. Maybe bishop e6 or queen at e6. Yeah, queen at e6. Covering everything. You can pick up the pawn. Looks like okei has everything under control here. He's 2 pieces up for a pawn. That's not enough compensation. But why did he put the knight there? Why didn't he put the queen? This is starting to look dangerous now. He should have put the queen there. This was completely unnecessary. Now he needs to give some material back. Let's say queen at e6, queen takes, bishop takes, and give one of those knights back. Don't panic. So, what is black supposed to do here? He needs to play something. And this looks just like panic to me. This ain't right. Look at those 3 white queens. Okay needs to win 2 games in a row here just to make it even. And he was playing so well in the opening here. This looks good for black. And I was wondering what happens if you take on h1. And apparently that's good, but this is also good. And taking on b5 was gutsy, but correct. And here, yeah, queen at e6 looks perfectly fine, keeping c8 under control and f7 and g6. And here, simply queen at d8, but this turned the tables. Queen at e6 is indeed the best defense. Let's have a look and see if okei can win 2 games in a row. He was up 3-2, remember? And this, I think, is a good reaction. As we saw in the previous game, rook b8 looked fine, but this is fine too. You could just pick up the bishop, I think. And black should be just fine here. Not so many defenders left on the white king side. And he's left with 2 knights and a rook in hand, and that's not the kind of pieces you want to mend your position with. Knights are usually poor defenders. Seems like white is out of ideas here. Black would love to put his hands on the knight here and start invading somewhere here on h4 or f4 with the knight. Although white got a bishop, maybe I can put it on g3 perhaps. Cover some dark squares. A rather passive placement of the bishop, but okay, at least you put a piece on the board. Simply moving the king looks perfectly fine. So maybe just knight h7. Let him trade on h7. This formation looks very solid for black. g5 is under fire. This is starting to look a bit desperate for white. And it's possible to just defend from behind. Bishop at g7 maybe. And with a very nice defensive setup here, black is ready to launch his counterattack. Clearing g2 for a pawn. Regain that heavy piece. And look how safe the black king is. I would just handle this very strategically, chess-like, I think. Pawn, no, you can't play pawn g2. Probably black should have blocked the h5 instead, with rook h5 or something. So rook f2. And the position is just hopeless here for white, who lets his time run out. Congratulations to Mindhunters, who's through to the next round of the Crazy House World Championship. Let's have a quick look at the tree here. We see that Jan Lee is through to the third round, as is Morlock, Suanet. Gornick is playing Fang McFrost. Master Tan is playing Hawaiian Dragon. Terra 87 against Math Ace. We have a few matches left in the second round here. But now all the big shots have entered the tournament. There is also a loser's bracket. So if you lose a game, you still have the chance to qualify. And it has just started. I suppose we don't have any more Crazy House games today. Blunderman has played against Legion Destroyer. So let's see. Blunderman. Blunderman. Isn't this the guy? Legion Destroyer. So it seems they haven't played their match. That's strange. I'll figure it out. Anyway, thank you so much for... that's the guy, yeah. But from what I saw, I think they were scheduled to play today at the same time, 4 p.m. But apparently they didn't. So maybe they're playing late. Aha, it's not the same tournament. It's the Crazy House 960 tournament. Hi there, okay. We just finished watching your very exciting match. And you had some chances there. And also your opponent missed some chances. So thank you for a very exciting match. Yeah. And I'll try to find someone to raid here. Just give me a moment. I will raid someone. Also your opponent missed some chances. Who is... Let's raid Anna Kramling. My fellow